Hello, I'm Tamara Galloway from London, England, and I'm going to demonstrate 4 modulations using the ES1 subtractive synthesizer in Logic Pro. Subtractive synthesis is when you take a harmonically rich waveform and remove some of the higher harmonics of it in order to change the timbre of a sound. And Logic Pro ES1 has a low pass filter that cuts off some of the higher frequencies. The first modulation I'm going to demonstrate is the Amplitude Envelope, and the source of my sound is in the oscillator where there's a saw wave, and it's routed via the attack, decay, sustain and release envelope to the gain in the amplifier using the ADSR via velocity slider. And you can see that I have a short attack, a short decay, a slightly long sustain and a short release. That's because I'm going to try to simulate a trumpet which rises at the attack at the beginning of a note in order to become slightly louder, because that's what happens when you have the initial blast of air with the trumpet. And so if you listen out for the initial loudness on each note, and the direction of this modulation is from the oscillator via the ADSR envelope to the gain. The second modulation that I'm going to demonstrate is the pitch low frequency oscillator, or pitch LFO, and I'm going to try to simulate vibrato on a string sound with this. And again, the source of the sound is the oscillator, but this time with a square wave, and it's routed from the low frequency oscillator set to a triangle wave and going via pulse width, so that LFO is set to pulse width. And the amount, if you think of this rate dial as like a clock face, is about 2:30 to 3 o'clock. So let's see how much like strings with vibrato this sounds. And this time the routing is, the direction is from the low frequency oscillator to the oscillator. The third type of modulation is modulating the gain using the low frequency oscillator to try to get a hollow tremolo bass sound. And of course, since it's a bass, I've moved the pitch down and I've made the sound fatter, but primarily the sound is coming from the oscillator. The source of the sound is the oscillator set to a square wave, but this time also almost half coming from the sub-oscillator as well. And the root is via the low frequency oscillator set to volume this time, and the amount is at about 3:30 on the clock face of this dial, and the intensity via wheel has to be set about a quarter of the way up, which is very important, otherwise it won't work. And finally, I'm going to demonstrate how to modulate timbre using the LFO this time routed to the filter instead. And I've got the source as a saw wave in the oscillator, and this time entirely the oscillator, not the sub-oscillator, and I've routed the low frequency oscillator to the cutoff in the filter this time. And in order to do that, well, in order to make it work, I need to greatly increase the resonance, which greatly increases the frequencies around the cutoff. And the amount again is at about 230 on this rate dial. And the direction of this modulation is from the low frequency oscillator, this time to the filter, well, to the cutoff in the filter. So let's hear that. So I hope you can hear the difference between those sounds with the amplitude envelope, the pitch low frequency oscillator doing vibrato, the gain low frequency oscillator doing the tremolo, and finally the timbre being modified again by the low frequency oscillator. Thanks for watching.